Mr. Speaker.
Tia ti mātou, mōna karakia ko waihotia mai ki runga i a mātou. Ka waihi o mātou pānga whaioro katoa ki te taha, ka mihi mātou ki te Kiingi me te uno atu, mo te arihitanga e roto i o mātou whakaaroarohanga. Kia mōhio ai, kia whakaeti ai tā mātou whakahaere i ngā take o te whare nei. Mo te oranga, te maungarongo me te aroha o Aotearoa. Āmeni.
I call the Right Honourable Prime Minister, Christopher Luck.
I move that this House note with sadness the death of Kiingi Tuheitia po tātou te wheru te tuawhitu, conveys its deepest sympathy to Kiingi Tuheitia's whānau, followers of the Kingitanga movement and all of Māoridom and the nation, and as a mark of respect to Kiingi Tuheitia's memory, this House now adjourn. Tēnā koutou e te whare, tēnā tātou e te motu, taupuri te maunga, waikato te awa, po tātou te tangata. Kiingi Tuheitia, haere atu rā, e te rangatira. Kuini nāwai, hono e te po, ara mai rā, ki tō ahurewa tapu. Today we honour and reflect on the life and legacy of Kiingi Tuheitia, a leader who has left an indelible mark on Aotearoa New Zealand. On behalf of the government, I would like to extend our deepest condolences to his family, to the Kingitanga and to all of those who were touched by his leadership. As Kiingi Tuheitia made his final journey along the Waikato River from Turanga Waiwai to his resting place at his ancestral maunga, Taupuri, thousands gathered from all corners of our country and the world to pay their respects, a testament to the profound impact that he has had on so many lives. Kiingi Tuheitia's passing marks the end of an era, but his spirit and legacy will continue to inspire for generations to come. Rest in peace, Kiingi Tuheitia. Kiingi Tuheitia was a servant to his people. He guided them with wisdom, strength and an unwavering commitment to kotahitanga. Kiingi Tuheitia carried himself with deep personal humility. A son of Huntly and a former truck driver, he had the ability to connect with people from any and all walks of life. He was not just a leader, but a friend and mentor to many, and in particular a strong advocate for young people. His words often carried the weight of profound wisdom, and his presence was a source of great comfort and strength, as I count myself so fortunate to have experienced. Kiingi Tuheitia made a rich contribution to his community and to public life. His love for kapahaka, commitment to te reo Māori, and unwavering support for communities in times of need are just a few examples of his enduring legacy. He encouraged everyone to embrace Māori culture in their daily lives and was deeply committed to the revitalisation and celebration of te reo Māori. And as the patron of Te Matatini, the country's largest Māori cultural festival, he took immense pride in the achievements of young people. At the recent Koronehana, he expressed this sentiment beautifully when he actually said, "When I hear our tamariki sing, my heart is full." Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, he was instrumental in providing support to the most vulnerable, transforming marae into support hubs, and ensuring food and care were available to those in need. And in the aftermath of Cyclone Gabrielle, he led the clean-up efforts for his people in Hawke's Bay, bringing helpers, equipment, food and essential supplies and aid to those affected. And not a man to shirk, he rolled up his sleeves and he mucked in, operating a digger himself to clear debris and silt in a display of the hands-on approach that characterised his leadership. Beyond his contributions to the Māori community, Kiingi Tuheitia played a significant role in fostering unity and cultural understanding across New Zealand and abroad. His leadership was instrumental in bridging gaps and building stronger relationships between different communities. At the recent Koronehana, he hosted the Pacific Ariki from across the world, and this gathering highlighted his commitment to fostering connections and mutual respect among Pacific leaders globally. Kingi Tuheitia proudly attended the Olympics, celebrating the New Zealand contingent and showcasing his support for our athletes and the spirit of international unity. Reflecting on this experience, he said, "Everything came together. Pakeha, Māori, all of us. Team New Zealand was amazing. I want to honour them." I know Kingi Tuheitia and King Charles enjoyed a decades-long friendship, and that King Charles held Kingi Tuheitia in the highest esteem. King Charles expressed his profound sadness at the passing of Kingi Tuheitia in a heartfelt statement. He remarked, "The death of Kingi Tuheitia is a moment of great sadness for followers of the Kingitanga, Māoridom and the entire nation." These are just a few examples of how his vision for a harmonious and inclusive society is one that we have to continue to strive towards. I do want to take this opportunity for the House to recognise the whānau, the Kingitanga and all of those who journeyed to Tūranga Waiwai to farewell Kingi Tuheitia. We acknowledge the hundreds, if not thousands, who actually worked tirelessly behind the scenes in the kitchens and throughout the marae, ensuring that the Kingi's farewell was a fitting tribute to a great leader. Some of you in this very house have had husbands, wives, partners, children and extended family playing those roles. And I also wish to acknowledge my fellow political leaders and parliamentarians who travelled to Tūranga Waiwai to pay their respects, whether representing your party, your iwi, your whānau or your communities. Your presence showed the deep connection, the enduring relationship and mutual respect that has been fostered over time between this house and the Kingitanga. Kingi Tuheitia leaves a legacy not just of leadership, but of service and dedication to his people. He was a beacon of hope and a source of inspiration for many. His commitment to the well-being of his people was evident in everything that he did. We will remember him not just for his achievements, but for the person that he was, kind and dedicated. And as we say our final goodbyes, we do so with gratitude for the time that we had with him and for the lessons that he imparted. He created space for us all, welcoming everyone with open arms and a generous spirit. And as we reflect on his legacy, we are reminded of the values he stood for: service, unity, and love for his people. His life was an example of the power of leadership rooted in compassion and respect. We welcome the Ariki, Ngāwai Hono e te Po, who will carry forward this mantle of leadership. The path ahead is illuminated by the legacy of Kingi Tuheitia. We embrace this transition with open hearts, honouring the past, while looking forward to a future of shared prosperity and kotahitanga. Rest in peace, Kingi Tuheitia, moi mai rā.
Mr. Speaker.
The Right Honourable Chris Hipkins.
Haere e te kingi o te kotahitanga. Haere ki o nui, ki o rahi i te pō. No te iwi Māori, i a rahi ki roto i ngā whakawhiu o te wā. No anō, te motu whanui i tiakina ki roto i ono ko papa maha. Kua tuki o te mahi katoa. Koutou o te pō ki a koutou. Tātou te hunga ora, tēnā tātou katoa. Mr. Speaker, I want to endorse the words of the Prime Minister and other members of Parliament who will shortly speak to mourn the loss of a great unifier in Kingi Tuheitia. Mr. Speaker, as I was preparing and practising my mihi for coming down here and speaking in this debate today, I recalled one of the first opportunities I had to interact properly with Kingi Tuheitia, which was in fact not here in New Zealand, but was at the coronation of another king, King Charles III in London. We had travelled as part of a delegation to London to celebrate the coronation of King Charles. And a particular proceeding at New Zealand House had not gone according to plan. Umbrage was taken, quite rightly, and shortly after that event I sat down with Kingi Tuheitia to settle things down again and to have a conversation. And I confessed to him then, relatively new in the job as leader of the Labour Party and at that point Prime Minister of New Zealand, that issues to do with Te Reo Māori and particularly any issues that involved me speaking in Te Reo Māori always made me nervous. And they would make me nervous because no matter how much I practiced my mihi beforehand, I could have it absolutely perfect before I stood up to speak. Under pressure of saying it in front of somebody else, I would inevitably speed up, I would trip over my words and I would get it wrong. And he said to me, and I've always remembered it. He said, the important thing is that you try, because people will acknowledge you for trying, and that is the important thing. And if you keep trying, you'll get better. And I think to some extent that actually reflects the relationship between the Crown, the government, and Māori. We have to keep trying, and we won't always get it right. And as we pursue kotahitanga, as we pursue unity and togetherness, there will undoubtedly be bumps in that road. But the key thing is, with goodwill and with effort, we can continue to make progress. I want to send my aroha to Kiingi Tuheitia's whānau. I know he loved and cherished them very, very much. He was a husband to wife Mākau Ariki, a father to his children, Whatu Moana, Korotangi, and to the newly crowned Te Ariki Queenie, Nāwai Hono i te pō. I want to acknowledge Waikato Tainui, who have lost a treasured kaumātua, and I want to thank them deeply for having graciously welcomed us all back to Tūranga Waiwai so that we could say our farewells. I was reassured at that meeting that we had in London that whenever we ventured to Tūranga Waiwai, we would always be greeted warmly and with aroha. There were some other exaggerated claims made during that time too, that the sun would always shine down on us and warm us when we arrived at Tūranga Waiwai. I can tell you that that has not been my recent experience of visiting there. But one thing is absolutely certain, that the warmth of aroha we were promised has always been evident when we have visited Tūranga Waiwai. And in that regard, I particularly want to recognise the volunteer army of aunties, uncles and rangatahi who make sure that nobody who shows up at Tūranga Waiwai goes home hungry. I can assure you that that has also been my experience of visiting there as well. Many from across the country have come forward over the past week to speak about kotahitanga and about the work that Kiingi Tuheitia did to bring us together as a country. When we travelled together and as we met together in a variety of different forums, it was very clear to me that we all shared a love of Aotearoa New Zealand, that Kiingi Tuheitia had a particular love for all of our people and our tamariki more so than most. His desire to achieve kotahitanga, to bridge division and to unify all of our peoples and communities was unquestioned. I had the opportunity to learn a little of who Kiingi Tuheitia was. The very fact that his last trip as king was to uplift our athletes at the Paris Olympics speaks of how much he loved Aotearoa. He would always back all of our people. The beautiful kakahu that he blessed for our flag bearers showed the world that we are proud to be New Zealanders. He was fearless in his devotion to Aotearoa. He had an immense love for his family and his people. He stood as a strong-spirited leader with an unwavering conviction to unite Māori and non-Māori alike. My last formal meeting with Kiingi Tuheitia as Prime Minister was at the last year's 10th forum held between Waikato Tainui and the Crown under the Kingitanga Accord. As I'm sure members opposite will be discovering, there are a lot of accords and lots of hui that go alongside those accords. But one thing that I learned from those conversations is that those forums are more than just transactional. They are an amazing opportunity for us to step into each other's world, for us to understand a little bit more about what's driving the other side in these discussions. And I found that particular meeting with the Kingitanga definitely exemplified that. We have so many shared aspirations, and we were able to talk about the contribution that the Kingitanga and the iwi had made in delivering housing for those who needed it. We signed an agreement there to build more affordable rental housing as part of the Hopu Hopu Hub complex, and that involved bringing government agencies working together with iwi. I want to acknowledge the incredible work under Kiingi Tuheitia's leadership that the Kingitanga and the Waikato Tainui have done in supporting the well-being of all those in their rohi. The Koiora Accord that I witnessed in 2022 was a major step forward for government and iwi as we worked together around issues to do with well-being. a perfect example of how working in partnership produces mutually beneficial outcomes. And the enduring partnership between the Crown and the Kingitanga that Kingi Tuheitia dedicated himself to as a staunch advocate for his people cannot go unnoted. That partnership, of course, comes with challenges, both historic and new, and Kingi Tuheitia, in the face of those challenges, rose to the occasion. He was embodied te kotahitanga in the way he stepped forward as a unifying force for his people. The accords that brought government and iwi together were an important partnership for iwi to hold the government accountable, and they had no hesitation in doing that. Across successive governments, we haven't always got things right, and where we've disagreed, I've always appreciated the free and frank discussions that we had with Kingi Tuheitia, the Kingitanga, and with Tainui. Just as his predecessors before dealt with the challenges of their generation, Kingi Tuheitia approached his with grace and a vision for peace. We don't need to look much further than the National Hui convened at Tūranga Waiwai in January this year, where thousands of Māori and non-Māori alike journeyed from across the country to kōrero about the serious issues facing the country. This past week has shown just how far-reaching Kingi Tuheitia's legacy is. News of his passing has extended way beyond the shores of Aotearoa. His mana transcended language and made all who called our beautiful country home feel like they belong. The mere fact that we had so many different communities heading to Tūranga Waiwai to pay their respects shows that Kingi Tuheitia had, without question, achieved his aspiration of bringing our people together as one. This is his legacy and how we will fondly remember him, and the mana that he had. So finally, on behalf of the Labour Party, I want to honour the memory of Kingi Tuheitia, his mana and his enduring legacy and lifetime of achievements. Generations now and into the future, both Māori and non-Māori, will certainly reap the benefits of all that Kingi Tuheitia worked to achieve for New Zealand. Now, of course, the torch has been passed to another new unifier. I also, on behalf of the Labour Party, want to congratulate Te Ariki Nui, Queenie Ngāwai Hono i te Po, on her coronation as the 8th Te Ariki Nui, the head of the Kingitanga. She carries on an incredible and historic legacy of the predecessors before her who have helped to shape and influence Aotearoa New Zealand's national identity. I send my warmest congratulations to the Queenie as she forges her own legacy as a connector and a bridge between Māori and non-Māori. I extend my aroha to her whānau, to Waikato Tainui on the coronation. I'm sure that will be recognised here and abroad. And I look forward to continuing with a productive, strong and robust relationship with Te Queenie, just as we had with Kingi Tuheitia. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Clarice Warburton.
E te manga e tēnā koe, tēnā koutou e te whare. Tuheitia ki runga, Tuheitia ki raro, Tuheitia whiwhia, Tuheitia ki rāwia. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Green Party of Aotearoa New Zealand, I stand and want to send our acknowledgement and our love to the sweetheart of Kingi o te kotahitanga, Māko Ariki te Atawhaia, to his whānau, to his 3 children, and of course, as the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition have acknowledged, our new Kuini, Te Ariki Nui Kuini Ngāwai Hono i te Po. Mr. Speaker, I also want to acknowledge Tainui, and so too for those of us who had the privilege and the honour of visiting Tūranga Waiwai last week, to acknowledge the kaimahi who make that marae go round. Mr. Speaker, I want to reflect on some of the sentiments as have been expressed by the likes of Annabelle Lee Mather, that we need to put them in charge of the country. Because if there is any entity, any group of people who have demonstrated their capacity to organise and to put day-to-day issues aside and to run on kaupapa, it is those behind the scenes, the kaimahi at Tūranga Waiwai Marae. Mr. Speaker, I also want to acknowledge a nation in mourning and as the Prime Minister did, the beautiful way in which tangihanga allows us to express and to work through our grief, and that incredible image of the Kiingi going down Waikato River before he was laid to rest. Last week, I travelled to Rangiwaiwai, as many in this house did, that day from Karangahape Road in Auckland Central, as tens of thousands of New Zealanders, of tangata tiriti, of tangata whenua, travelled from across the motu, and so too many travelled from across the oceans, an absolute testament to the power of Kiingi Tuheitia to bring people together and his legacy. Mr. Speaker, I bought the words of the Honourable Marama Davidson in my pocket because, of course, she unfortunately could not be there. And I had the privilege of passing those along to some of the members of the Kingitanga. And, Mr. Speaker, there is an important point to make here about the starting of the opening of myself and Marama Davidson's co-leadership, first being established, our first outing as a co-leadership duo, being at Tūranga Waiwai Marae. We had the absolute humbling honour of being invited to a private audience with Kiingi Tuheitia and his wife. And there we discussed the intricate interconnections, the overlap between Green Party kaupapa, upholding people and planet, and what that looks like in the context of the Kingitanga movement. And specifically, we went on to discuss the proposal on the table from Indigenous leaders across the Pacific, which was a legal personhood for whales. And Mr. Speaker, I think that was just one of the many iterations and examples of where Kiingi Tuheitia's love for this planet and all who live on it was deeply exemplified. Much like the Honourable Chris Hipkins, or the Right Honourable Chris Hipkins, in the times that I have had the opportunity to speak and engage at Tūranga Waiwai Marae, I need to acknowledge that I have had my heart in my throat and have been shaking in my boots. And Mr. Speaker, the thing that Kiingi Tuheitia taught me is that that sense of fear or trepidation that comes effectively from a sense of cultural ignorance is not something that should spur fear, but in fact is an invitation. It is an opportunity to learn and to break down barriers. And Kiingi Tuheitia made that learning an incredibly safe prospect. He made trying and reaching out and engaging and participating and working through discomfort something that all of us should not fear, but something that all of us should aspire to. Trying mattered. It meant that you turned up and that you gave yourself an opportunity to grow. That discomfort was not something to avoid, but something to inspect and ultimately to find what connects us, to reach into our whakapapa, to find how together we heal, to understand ourselves in relation to each other. Ultimately, where we find that sense of solidarity, which, as I had the honour of engaging with kōrero just 2 weeks ago with Kiingi, doesn't require homogeneity. That solidarity is simply about understanding what connects us as opposed to what divides us. And it was that generosity of imagination from Kiingi Tuheitia that I think really profoundly defined who he was and how he had such an immense impact on so many of our lives. He ultimately saw what we could be and invited all of us to participate in that. Now, Mr. Speaker, on the night of Kiingi Tuheitia's passing, I was travelling back through the central North Island with some of my caucus colleagues after visiting workers potentially impacted by the proposed WPI closure. And as we'd been there in that community in Mount Ruapehu, community members said something which struck a chord. It was that some of the fundamental things that they were asking for in terms of a sense of security and predictability about their future, the ability to belong in their community and to flesh out their sense of identity, that these things in politics should be considered non-negotiables. And as we were travelling back to Whanganui-Atara, I was reflecting actually on those sentiments as expressed by that Mount Ruapehu community member and how it reminded me of something that Kiingi Tuheitia had said about how jobs, housing, kai and education were all far bigger than day-to-day politics. Effectively, that those things are kind of the fundamental truths that all of us in this house should aspire to uplift and uphold. Of course, we kind of also know them as human rights. And Mr. Speaker, that night, as the sun fell and the skies opened up and lightning danced across that sky, I think, in retrospect, that was an emblem, perhaps, of the raw power of nature, a marker of the significance of the loss to come. Or perhaps how we will all find symbols in something, how human beings need stories, and how the stories that we tell ourselves create the world that we all live in, how the power of those stories also offers us the vehicle to change that very world. Mr. Speaker, Kingi Tuheitia said that mana motuhake has room for everyone, and I think that that is something that all of us, especially at this point in human history and at this point in Aotearoa New Zealand, should reflect on. At the end of last year, where some conceived of a potential attack on the constitutional foundations of this country, Kingi Tuheitia instead saw an opportunity to affirm, to clarify who we are and what we should aspire to be. And the connections that we've made here are between what we aspire to do and what we call progressive politics, where we want to build the house for all of us to move into before simply turning to burn it down, the one that we currently operate in. And I also reflect upon the fact that the Kingitanga movement is not a conquering nor a colonial monarchy, but one by Māori for all. And Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me not to also acknowledge and to celebrate Te Ariki Nui Kuini, nā wai hono i te pō, for the leadership that she will come to embody and already does, that her father did too. She represents, as many others have noted, a new generation at a critical time. And I want to make sure that it is on record that we are here to do that same work, to build that same relationship, and to move forward to live up to the aspirations of the Kingitanga movement. So, Mr. Speaker, as we were there at that tangi just last week, and many spoke about the power of Kingi Tuheitia's legacy, I couldn't help but think that that legacy was not simply in the actions that he undertook, not simply in the values that he brought to the forefront, but also living in the tens of thousands of people who came to visit and pay their respects, and the ripple effects through the millions that live throughout this country and the Pacific. Mr. Speaker, to close in the words of Princess Tupuia Hirangi, ka mahi ahau, ka inoi ahau, ka moi ahau, ke mahi anō. We work, we pray, we sleep, we work again. Moi mai rā I te kingi o tahitanga.
The Honourable David Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Te whatiwha te pō, te whatiwha te ao, ka nui te aroha, ka nui te mamai. Gloom and sorrow prevail day and night. We send our love and we share in the pain. E whakaike mai ngā iwi katoa ki runga I a tūranga waiwai marae. I eke mai mātou I runga I te nākau aroha te whakapiripiri me te pōri. Nā koutou e tangi ana, nā tātou katoa e tangi. The tribes of the world gathered to tūranga waiwai marae. We arrived to share a gesture of love, to come together, to celebrate and to grieve. You shared your sorrow and pain, and thank you for sharing your family member with the world. Aka ki ngā kaikōrero, koea te kingi o te kotahitanga, noho ana I roto e te poho o tupuna. As the orators have said, he was a king of oneness and unity. Go now into the arms of ancestors and rest. E kōrero ai ngā kai kōrero o Erowa, ko te au ki kiko he waka o te whakaoranga anake. Me whakau I te tātou mo hiotanga o te tinana me te wairua, ke te taha o ngā tupuna e arihi I a tātou ki tērā wahi ki te ao wairua, ki te kainga wairua o ngā tupuna. The orators of old have said, the physical world is merely a vehicle by which we communicate with all life and establish our understanding of who we are. We are accompanied by ancestral lines who guide us to the next place and to the spiritual home of the ancestors. Kareko he kupu ngā wari he whakamama I te mamai o ngā iwi o te motu. E pirangi ana a hau ki te kōrero e pa ana ki te kotahitanga me te kai a te rangatira a ko te kōrero pēna. A ki riro atu ai te kingi ka tū ana te kuini Māori, te ari kinui kuini ngā waihono I te po tātou, te whero waru, te kuini tuarua anake mō te iwi Māori. I have no words that will ease the pain of the masses, but I want to speak of togetherness and partake in the food of chiefs that be conversation. As a king passes into the realm of the ancestors, a new queen has been crowned. Te ara kinui kuini ngā wai hono I te po tātou, te whero, the eighth, the second queen to the Māori people. He tohu tua ingoa, he tohu mō te hononga o ngā awa tapu, ngā awa tuturu a te awa a whanganui, me te awa a Waikato, e maumahara ana mato kia haere whakamua I runga I te aroha, kia uai ki te aomarama, ki roto I ngā manawa o ngā tangata o te ao Māori e noho tātari ana mō tō ringa e te kuini Māori, nā wari ana te tō haerenga whakamua. A name representing the joining of two powerful rivers, two vastly different spaces. We hope you can move forward from this state of grief and into the light and into the arms of all the people who love you. We wish you all the peace on your journey through grief. We hope you may move forward to the world of light again in time. May you rest in peace and long live the Māori Queen.
Call on the Honourable Shane Jones.
Reo Māori. Ua ke nā te tatau o te rangi. Kia pē ki ake ki runga. Ki te rangi tuatahi. Ki te rangi tuarua. He tai koe ki raro. E uia mai ai koe. Ko te aha tēnā, o te paki o te ao kamaunu. Ko te taroi o te riri e. E kara e Kiingi Tuheitia. Ka tahi anō tēnei whare pāremata kia tūpono I te tahi āhuatanga pēnei ka hikina ngā kaupapa o te whare ka whakatairangetia ko koe me ngā mahi I oti a koe I tō wā. Rereke rawa atu I te wā, ia hau I te kōhungahunga. E hara e kara koe I te ika whakawera. E hara koe I te waha papa. O tira ko tō rite kei te ihu whakawera kei te whakaihu waka. Aha koa te ngau o te māwiwi. Aha koa te ngoikore hauareatanga o tō tinana I māro tonu koe. I tū ai koe hei matua mo tō whānau, I tū ai koe hei ariki mo tō iwi ara ngā whakapapa o ngā hau e whā. Kua pau ia mātou te uta I ngā mihi e rite ana mō I te aroaro o te whare moko e huangia nei ki te ingo o tō tupuna a Mahinarangi. I tēnei rā ko tā mātou he tāpiri atu I te kupu, kia kitea ai ngā mahi kei roto I tēnei whare ki te aroaro o ngā tāngata katoa kei tō tātou motu. Nā reira, hei kapinga I tēnei wahanga me pēnei te kōrero. Tā te mea ko te pīkauranga I utaina ki ronga I a koe e hara no tēnei wā. He pīkaunga I tukua ki runga I tō tuara mai I o tūpuna mai te ao kohatu. Nā hau I rapu me pēhea rānei ngā taonga, me pēhea rānei ngā tikanga o te ao tauhito e kite ai I roto I te ao hou. Nā reire kara, māku e whakahua ki te aroaro o tō tātou motu katoa, ko koe te uri a tōhe, I te onero a tōhe. Te ara I oti I a koe te whekoi ngaro atu ki te rerenga wairua. Tā tōhe ko rānini kura. Tā rānini kura ko rāhingahinga. Tā rāhingahinga ko tīkatarangi. Tā tīkatarangi ko te huaki ki te rangi. Tāna ko waimirirangi, te kuini o te taitokerau. Ka puta iaia ko haere ki te rā. Ta haere ki te rā ko takamoana. Ta takamoana ko more te korohunga. Ta more te korohunga ko te ikanui. I te au pauri, I te taitokerau. Tā te ikanui ko tūpuni. Tā tūpuni ko te ihupango. Tā te ihupango ko hāpai. Tā hāpai ko praoni ngaruhe nāna te tiriti o Waitangi I Tāmoko. Tāna ko ngāwaka. Tā ngāwaka ko kiritokia. Tā kiritokia ko paranihi. Tā paranihi ko whatu moana, kātahi koe e Kiingi Tuheitia kaputa. Haere, haere, haere o te atue. Mr. Speaker, within the Māori world, a host of roles are served up for people to serve. Some are taken by ringa kaha. Some are given, for example, through a political process. And some, in rare circumstances, are inherited. And the inheritance of the person we salute today, King Tuheitia, was underpinned by a sacred pledge. And that pledge is traceable back to the ancestors whose names I've recited in this house, because today, in my lifetime, not only as a parliamentarian, a parent, but a member of my own tribe, Te Aupōuri, is a particularly special day, something I have not seen before. Because I represented, along with my former colleague, Parekoro Horomia, the government of the day, at Te Ātairangi Kāhustangi. And when I was a little boy, I remember vividly my kuia, my grandmother and others, rustling and bustling to catch trains, to catch buses, to go and farewell King Koroki. So I do not think that we should underestimate what we are doing today. Irrespective of the role, Mr. Speaker, all roles have to be fulfilled. And you don't fulfill a role unless you can capture respect. And respect can only be earned. And in the 18 years, King Tuheitia, who came from a very earthy background, served his time not only as a truck driver, but working at what we might call the grassroots level of his people in Waikato. But as he grew into the role, it would be very churlish and it would be negative of any Kiwi not to acknowledge in the latter stage of his career, he found the sweet spot. Not only did he provide an opportunity for the various iwi to come together, but he sought to reach out and be a figure that went beyond the ebb and flow of politics and indeed the other debates that swirl around and make us Kiwis. So we salute those efforts of his. As I said in our Māori language, he is not the ika whakawera, i.e. the boaster. He is not the waha papa, the loudmouth. He was the humarika, the one who appreciated the dignity of silence and often let silence do his talking for him. Somewhat in contrast to various people in this house, myself included. Thank you very much.
Call on Debbie Nauru Peka.
Tēnā koe te pika. Nei rā te Pāti Māori te tuku nei I te aroha ngā mihi taurangai ki te whare tapu o pōtātou. I te reroanga o Kiingi Tuheitia pōtātou te whiruwhiro tuawhitu. Ko te kotahitanga o te iwi te whainga. Ko te taonga anō hoki tēnā ka wakarerea iho ki a tātou katoa. Ko Kiingi Tuheitia, te kingi o te kotahitanga, te kingi o Taranaki, te kingi o ngā rangatahi, te kingi o te Pāti Māori. Ririri ho, pai māriri. I pay tribute to the government for allowing this to happen today. It means more than you could know, particularly outside of the House. I share the sentiments of my tūngānia Shane. It's important that we understand what we're doing today and what is potentially possible for us because of our kingi. When we left the last day of the House, I was travelling back very similar to Chloe through some really atrocious weather. The skies opened up. The lightning was everywhere. The thunder was louder than I'd ever heard. And for us who have been around a few summers, you could tell that there was a tupuna tohu coming, a very spiritual moment coming. And when Hannah texted us early in the morning, I wasn't surprised. For us, the Kiingi and Taranaki, if I can start there, we have a kaupapa called te kiwai o te kite. It is something that most of us have been raised understanding the significance that we have spiritually to the kingitanga. The kingitanga movement came about when we were at our lowest. Things were going really bad for us as Taranaki. Mururau patu was rife. Division, the haves and the have-nots, the way that we were being treated was pretty tough. And the kingitanga came about because of the wisdom of some very special people. And I was always raised to understand the role of Te Ua Haumene and the heavens that opened up. And he was one of our prophets. And I was always raised in the kōrero ko te kingi kei runga, kei raro te poropiti. And the significance of the kingitanga for us to be thinking collectively as a nation and as a people. Te kiwai te kite, Taranaki were told we had one handle of the kite and Waikato Tainui had the other. And together we had to make sure the spirituality within the kite for us as a nation with the kingitanga was well. And the kingi would often, and the kingitanga often taught me as a young person, is that we can be physically and politically as loud as we want, but if we're spiritually not well as a nation, we won't do well. And that was a really important part of what our kingi continued to live. As Taranaki, we had them lead and become part of Te Pūtake o Te Riri. We had our kingi visit for the first time in Pariaka last year, I think about November, and we had a whole lot of a kōrero that came about and helped us to believe that actually maybe we can navigate through some of the things that don't bring us together. He encouraged what his forefathers did at the most humblest way, that we can and we are better off collectively focusing on what it is that our future generations need. He was a kingi that not only was relatable and would actually take us out for dinner, he would sit there and share his aspirations that probably matched most of us here, is that we would all achieve our true potential and that our rangatahi could be Māori every day, except one critical thing about the kingitanga and the kingi was our role in our kaimanaki. And perhaps we haven't done that well enough, was to talk about what it is that my responsibility to look after the visitors and those that are here after the tangata whenua. Perhaps that's a kōrero that the kingi used to always make sure, and even as late as the last coronation, to remind us that it is absolute honour to be tangata whenua, but it's a bigger honour to manaaki and look after our visitors better. So it was really good to see, David, that you were up there as well, and to make sure that we were able to stand together, united. Some of us had been there the whole time, some arrived later. One of the things that we used to talk about with the kingi was also his role And the last time I was in Hawaii for a ocean kaupapa, our kingi had just come out of hospital and didn't let that sway from his belief in our obligation in wakapapa to our Pacific nations. One people, one ocean, multiple waka. And he had the humility to remind us of our obligations. I would love, and as a kōrero that we had with him, I would love that the full diplomacy could be awarded to the kingitanga and to our Queenie, and I would love that our Premier thinks of that sometime. I think the other thing that's really important to talk about with our kingi is the significance that we were able to always think about our rangatahi, and just recently we were able to have our rangatahi Puawai Hudson and Paringaia Tapiata come together and not only share their kōrero of what the kingitanga meant and what the kingi meant to them, but also their connection to ko tā mātou ariki nui, Queenie ngā waihono i te pō. We have a Queenie amongst us who is a rangatahi. We have an opportunity that our kingi showed us that we could truly achieve, and he may not have lived to see us achieve it, but I do believe that this whare has an important, significant role on what we do from the lessons that we have and the honour that we have to be talking about our kingi in this whare. The honour that we have to be looking at the rangatahi and the example that we have with our Queenie. And I really hope that everyone follows suit as Te Pāti Māori will in pledging our alliance, our allegiance, our support to help her growth. Whereas our Queenie, our kingi's daughter, is going to spend most of her adulthood as a Queenie. I think as wahine, I think as leaders, as political examples, exemplars, that we need to make sure that we are there to support her as her papa would have wanted. I agree on the sentiments that our kingitanga has been extremely generous, as has Tainui, in supporting that we have the whānau be around for us. One of the things that I really enjoyed with our kingi is that he opened up his comms. So I don't know how many of you have seen a kingi or Queenie with social media, but we got to see our kingi in his natural form, out of ceremony, in a casual sense. So for those of us that look for exemplars, for examples, our kingi would open up. During COVID, we had special karakia. During the koroneihana, during kaupapa, during pokai, we got to be part, as we all did, of the kingitanga movement. The kingitanga movement in our kingi comes from a line, as Shane ever so eloquently was able to repeat. What that means to us is that the vision of kotahitanga has always been on the breaths, on the lips, in the hearts of all of those that have lived in his lineage. That is something that we all aspire for, and I urge, if there's any lessons that we take from the legacy of our kingi, is the opportunity before us to think, to act, to believe differently, to perhaps, and I look at my own reflections on what it is that I do to help others from a spiritual perspective. It was extremely spiritual to be up at Turanga Waiwai in the last week. I was around as a younger one under Hurangi Mā and Whaiamere brought in when our Queenie passed away 18 years ago. And I will say I'm most unlikely to see, hopefully, that again. But what I would do, all ask as Aotearoa, that we take that moment and embrace that, because that is our history. That is something that we all wakapapa to, under te tiriti. We all belong to the kingitanga. We all were part of the vision for a united Aotearoa. We all need to be reminded of our role, as the kingi did. He encouraged that we continue to look after each other, that we weather the storm, and we weather the storm together. Not by some standing over there under shelter and some being left behind. Māori are the forever people, but we must also remember we are the forever hosts, and we must forever host and look after our visitors. Nō reiri te āhuatanga o tā tātou, tupuna, haere, haere, haere i te kingi. And to our ariki kui, ngā waihono i te pō, long live the kingitanga. Kia ora rā. Kia ora.
Oh, yeah. The Honourable Tamapataki.
Korero māku te whakaputa I te waka ki waho moana e te Premier Kiritopa Luxon, tēnā koe o mahi rangatira. Taupiri te maunga Waikato te awa, hotatau, te tangata, te tupuna, te tupua, te taniwha. Waikato horo paunamu, Waikato taniwha rau. He piko, he taniwha, he piko, he taniwha. Kei taku ariki Tuheitia pōtatau te whero te tuawhitu. Haere ki o tupuna te kāwai o te kahu kiwi ki te pō o te atu rā. Tō tira haere e hara I te ruarua toru noiho. Ko kahurangi June Mariu, ko Midge te kani, ko Davina Ruru, ko Piki Waritini. A pōpō, waikahua, waika mōhio. Wheku kawana te nuku I te roimata mau e taku Kiingi. Ko rahi tō te Kiingi mana whakaiti hoki ki te wānanga o Aotearoa. Ki ngā motu o Aotearoa New Zealand. Ki te moana nui a kiwa, ki ngā taumā heke o te ao, te whare o Kiingi te are te tuatoru. Ko rangona tōna māramatanga, tōna manaakitanga, kua tau tōna kaitiakitanga ki ngā kaupapa nui o te wā. Nā te Kiingi o te maungarongo a tāwhia o pērā ki te whakatauki 20 maiwa a Rāwiri ki te paipera tapu. Ki te kore he whakakitenga ka ngaro te iwi. Koia, ia Kiingi Tuheitia mo te oranga o te iwi o te Corona-19, nāna no te ki, amohia ake te ora o te iwi kia puta ki te whaiau. E ki ana te kōrero a kiri haihai te puia herangi. Me he mea he pai mo te tangata, mahia. Katahi rā tō te Kiingi tauira, ki ngā mahi kaitiaki toho rā, wērā hoki, ara he whakaputanga moana, I tata, I tāia, I te taunei. Nā te Kiingi hoki, I whakatakoto I te huarahi, mo te tini ranga takapu Māori I ona kōrero. Me Māori koe, ia wā, ia rā. He iwi taurikura tātou, e kore, e ngaro. Kua tuhia ki ngā rai, a tēnā, ki ngā pūrongo o pukamata, me ngā whakaata New Pepper hoki. Ta I rā ngā miro katoa, I tui atu ki tōna ngira ki tūranga waiwai I te wiki rā. I whai hoki I ona hoa I hara mai I ngā tōpito o te ao, ko ngā humeka, ko ngā kāmura, ko ngā parakimete, ko ngā pekarohi. Tatu atu rā ki ngā kōtuku rere ngātahi, ngā ringa rehe, ngā kaitōranga pū, ngā ringa raupā, o ia hāpori, o ia iwi. Kiingi Tuheitia, Kiingi o te kotahitanga, Kiingi o parihaka, Kiingi o te matatini, Kiingi o te kura o tipene. Mati atu he toa. Kuini, ngā wai hono I te pō, aramai, he toa wahine, he toa rangatakapu. Kei ia te ihi, te wehi, te wana, te mauri, te mana, te wairua, a te rau anganga. Mākawari ki ata whai me ngā tamaroa, te pāhara keke, kia kaha, kia maia, kia manawanui. Kei te tekau mārua, kia ita, 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 mautonu. E kore mimiti aku mihi mā horahora ki ngā ariki o te tai Māori, mārei kura, whatukura, ngā tumuaki, tō tātou ariki a tumu, hone, te manuao, ngā ringa wera ki ngā kauta o Kimiora, Tūrongo me te dungeon, ara te whānau raumati mā, ngā tuara, ngā kēmu riki a tūranga waiwai, a tani wharau, ngā kaifoi waka, ngā wātene Māori, ngā hāwini pērā i a Mere Daniels, ngā parikāranga me ngā pātaka kōrero pērā i a Rāhui Papa, Taki Tiruki, ngā whakai whakanoho noho, ngā hāpore a parakore, ngā whakarite urupā ki taupiri kuao, ruku moana, ngira, era kātu ruruhi koroheke. Nō rātua nō i whakahinau i te marae ki o te pai te uhunga o te rua te koutou ka pahure ake nei. Kāore i ko atu i te kingitanga, i Waikato tainu i a tūranga waiwai mo tēnei āhuatanga, te manaakitanga, te mana motu ake, te whakatinanatanga o te kotahitanga. Hei whakatepi aku mihi kā meha meha, Minita Whae Judith Collins me te ope kātua o Aotearoa, ngā memo te whare pāremata, i mahua ngā kākā tō rangapū, kia kāpuhi atu tātou ki te uhunga me te whakawāhinga, e hoa mā, ke te tangotango hoki, ka kiptea te māramatanga, kei reira, te kotahitanga, e pāro nei i te nuku o te whenua. Ko e nei te tongi kura, hei whakatauira mai te korowai o te kingitanga, ko tahi te kōhao te ngira, e kuhana te miro pango, te miro whā, te miro whero. Tatu atu rā ki te miro kahurangi, te miro kākāriki, te miro māwhero, te miro pāpura, me te miro mangumangu. E kore wareware tia tō tātou kingi, engari kei taku koini, maranga mai tati tātou, ngā iti a mōtai, ngā roimate e rua a rua pehu, ngā kōkō tangi wai a mahi nārangi, me ngā kōawawa, ngā riu o te ika Māui me te waipanam. Tēnā tātou katoa.
The Honourable Willie Jackson.
Speaker, tēnā no tātou katoa. Firstly, Mr Speaker, I want to thank the Prime Minister for this day. I think it's a wonderful tribute to the King, so ngā mihi kia koe. Also to all the party leaders who went to the tangi, I want to thank all of you. Really important, I think, that Aotearoa see us in that type of space. No matter how things are sometimes in the House or in the media, ngā mihi kia koutou. I thought it was just fantastic. Congratulations also, obviously, to Tainui, and I was listening to our minister there, and Rāhui Papa, just magnificent. Just magnificent in terms of the way he facilitated that tangi, because in many ways it was more than a tangi. It was an expression of our culture. Aotearoa saw it firsthand with the best in the business with Rāhui Papa, who I've since informed that there's a vacancy going in Tainui at the moment that he said he would look at. But congratulations to him. Congratulations, of course, to Queenie Ngāwai Hono i te pō. I'm sure she's going to do really, really well. But listening today, it's been just tremendous listening to all the kōrero. Shane Jones, always brilliant in terms of whakapapa, yourself, Tama, Minister, I should say. I mean, it's just been a great tribute. But I want to say, Mr Speaker, and I want to congratulate you too for coming along and for your kōrero, Mr Speaker. I want to say that it's a bit sombre because, as Hannah knows, this king was a great character. We had so much fun with this king. You know, he had his own type of language, didn't he, Hannah? You know, it wasn't always on cue, but you know, he was just a personality plus. And some of us who got to know him in the last few years have really enjoyed the relationship, especially myself, Mr Speaker, because back in 2017, I wasn't really enjoying the relationship because he joined the Maori Party. Yeah. And it was an incredibly upsetting time for us. I remember it well. And so I decided not to talk to him for a while, Mr Speaker. I thought, I'm not going to talk to you for a while. I always thought you were a Labour man. Your mother was, I'm sure. And in 2018, he hit me up and he said to me, "Get over it, Willie. What the hell's wrong with you?" You know, and apparently John Tamahere had said, "Oh, he's not going to talk to you because he's an elite Māori and he only chooses who he picks, who he talks to, thanks to Te Pāti Māori." But the king hit me up and he said, "Let's get on with it. Let's get on with it. Let's start developing the relationship in terms of Tainui and the government. And didn't we do some wonderful things? Jacinda Ardern, Chris Hipkins, and I'm sure this government will build on that relationship. Because while I talk about Te Pāti Māori, the main thing for the king was kaupapa Māori. He wanted to build the health of Tainui. He wanted to build the housing of Tainui. He wanted to build the education of Tainui. And didn't he do a fantastic job? Didn't he do a fabulous job? You're talking about someone, Mr. Speaker, who was not groomed to be the king. He did not want to be the king. He was very, very clear. He said, I'm a man who works with my hands. I'm a truck driver. I'm a person who can fix things. But didn't he grow into the role? I was just so proud of him. I think he's an example to not just Māori, but all New Zealanders, that you can do this type of mahi if you put in the hard yards, if you put in the hard work, and you have a passion for your people. So he might not have been an academic. He wasn't an orator. He wasn't a Māori language expert, but he became a leader in all those areas. Isn't that ironic? That this humble man became such a leader for our people. So I want to mihi to him and to his whānau. And I want to remember some of the words that he said, because at the end, I remember having him on. I was saying, you're sounding like Martin Luther King. No one would believe you were a truck driver. You know, when you come out with words like our kotahitanga shouldn't be focused on fighting against the government. Instead, we need to focus on getting in the waka and working together. Mana motuhake has room for everyone. And his last message, the best protest that we can do right now is to be Māori. Be who we are, live our values, speak our reo, care for our mokopuna, our awa, our maunga. Just be Māori all day. Every day we are here, we are strong. Beautiful, beautiful words, Mr. Speaker, from a humble man who became, in my view, a great leader and a great king. We will never forget him. He made such an impression on so many people, and I know so many New Zealanders will be proud of what they saw and heard over the last week. So again, I want to thank everyone for contributing to this tangi. It was a tangi of a generation. Nō reira, e te Kiingi, e kore mātou e ware ki tō koha mo tō tātou iwi. Kia oki I runga I te rangi māria. Kia ora, Mr. Speaker.
I call Puhananunu.
I taku tūranga ake, I roto I tēnei whare, ka tura ki te rau o te aroha e. Tai mahai ruki, te tinana I te aroha, e kore rawa e tū tika I te tai maha e. E moe e te ariki nui. Hoki ki tō whaia, hoki ki wō mātua tūpuna, ki runga taupuri maunga, haere oti atu. I tērā wiki, I kite te motu whānui, I te tini mano tāngata, I whakaeke ki runga tūranga waiwai marae, ki te poroporaki, ki te kawe I te aroha, I te ngākau moke, kiaia, ki tōna whānau, kia tainui, a ki te iwi Māori, nō reira, moi mai rā. E ai ki te kōrero, he toka tū moana, he akinga no ngā tai, ko Kiingi Tuheitia tērā, tō tātou toka mō te kotahitanga, haere oti atu. Te upoko ariki, ko Kiingi Tuheitia tērā, te Kiingi o te kotahitanga. Koia ahau, te uri o Tainui e mihi atu ana kiaia, ki runga ngā whakapaparanga maha kei wainganui a tātou, haere oti atu. Mr. Speaker, I pay tribute to Kiingi Tuheitia, and I would like to acknowledge his sweetheart, Te Mako Ariki, Whaia Te Atawhai, his tamariki e mokopuna. For I am sad for Tainui iwi who have not had a chance to grieve. They have been a massive host to the motu. To the whānau who were on show the entire time for all New Zealand to see. Live stream, nightly news, They were everywhere, and they have not had privacy to be able to grieve the loss of their father, grandfather and Kiingi Tuheitia. So I pay tribute to the ringa hora, the ringa manaaki nui, tērā iwi a tātou, rangatira a tainui waka, ka mihi, ka mihi. O tira ki te whānau, koia tētahi wāhi kia koutou, kia noho, ki te poroporaki i tō koutou matua. Tō koutou pau o te whānau, o tira mo tātou katoa ki rota Aotearoa whānui. Nō reire te whānau, tiakina ia koutou. Atawhai i tō tātou makau ariki. Me ki, poi a tonu, tō tātou ariki nui, ngā wai hono i te pō, kia ora tātou katoa. Now, I want to reflect on Kiingi Tuheitia and some of his words, as Matua Willie has shared already, that he has brought forward in the hui ā-motu, because many of us for sure have had informal engagements with Kiingi Tuheitia and have had the opportunity to sit with him casually and enjoy his comedy, his personality and his humble straight talk on kaupapa of the day. But Kiingi Tuheitia was the king of kotahitanga, and he called for us to come together. And at the hui ā-motu, when he said, you know, this waka of kotahitanga has a paddle available for everyone, that we might get in the waka to keep it steady and hoi tahi. That's something that we can learn in this whare and absolutely across our communities. And the outpouring of aroha manaaki from tauiwi, from iwi Māori, from schools, from dignitaries, from Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, puta i Aotearoa, is a tribute to his call for kotahitanga across Aotearoa. He said in the hui ā-motu, kotahitanga is a way of life. It's not a committee, not a board. We need to dream, we need to be creative, sing waiata and let our culture grow. Now, he was inspired by our youth, and he was the patron of Te Matatini. And Ngā Manu Kōrero, the National Māori Speech Competitions, are on right now in Tāmaki Makaurau. And I believe if he was here, he would be front row right now. And I mihi to you, Tama, your daughter is standing right now in Ngā Manu Kōrero. And as a tungane, it's a sacrifice for you to be here. Ka tuku aroha kia koe i tēnei wā. E te whānau, kotahitanga is not a dream. It's something that we should all be working towards. And the way that we can all get into the waka together is something that we need to work towards, I would argue, because the example is there from the way with which tainui came together, the young people in the kitchen serving us, the whānau out the back in the dungeon carving the beef and the mutton, Auntie Mokotini monitoring all the media across the site, the taumata, te kaumārua, all whakahaere, they're all there doing their work. And I enjoyed the company of the Māori wardens as they were ushering us to the appropriate place to park, because often I was trying to get elsewhere, but I wasn't allowed. Now, those are things that we can learn in terms of the way that everyone fell into line as tainui mobilised to host us again, because they had already hosted us in the Koroneihana. These are things that are important for us in this time of need. And I want to reflect back quickly to our ariki nui, Queenie, ngā wai hono i te pō, te tirahau, an opportunity for us to support a young woman, a breath of fresh air, a new perspective in the way that we can listen and learn from the voice of young people as they look to us, those of us in the house, to mahi tahi. And this is our chance to hui tahi again with her, seek the audience and look to move forward together as Aotearoa New Zealand. Tākiri tū te kotahitanga, tākiri tū ko te mana motuhake, haere atu rā e Kiingi Tuheitia, ko ngā waihono i te pō ki te whenua. Kia ora.
Call on the Honourable Nicole McKee.
At Turanga Waiwai, they came in their thousands to pay their respects to Kiingi Tuheitia over many days. On the day of his burial, they lined the awa as the waka carried him to join his tipuna on Taupere Maunga. When I attended Turanga Waiwai, the mai was palpable. It swept across the marae as if carried by the wind and the rain. Great waves of sadness and people came together to mourn a man who had grown into his role over 18 years. As we sat and listened to orators reminisce about Kiingi Tuheitia, many recalled their most recent encounter with the Kiingi at the 18th anniversary of his coronation. It was a reminder of how quickly things can change, how fragile and fleeting our lives really are. Amid the sadness, though, there was also an incredible sense of power and wairua, never more obvious than when the students of the King's alma mater, Aotearoa, St. Stephen's, performed their haka. We literally felt the ground shake as they farewelled one of their own. Kiingi Tuheitia po tātou te Whirowhiro VII ascended to the throne at the age of 51 on the death of his mother, Te Ariki Nui Dame Te Atarangi Kahu, in 2006. While he stood beside the throne at his mother's coronation in 1966, he was not widely expected to follow in Te Atarangi Kahu's footsteps, as his older sister, Hene Katipa, had been considered a candidate for the mantle of sovereignty. Born in Huntly, Kiingi Tuheitia spent his early school years at Rakomanga School in Huntly before heading to Hamilton and Southwell School. As I mentioned earlier, he then went on to board at Hatutipini St. Stephen's College in Bombay. Those who knew the late Kiingi described him as an ordinary man who spent much of his working life as a truck driver and in his spare time could be found tinkering with cars or watching the rugby league. After attaining university entrance, he had returned to Huntly to work in the mines. There are tales of him spending time as a truck driver, where he was renowned for picking up hitchhikers. Imagine the stories those travellers would have been able to tell had they realised their driver would later head the Kingitanga. The late King's working life also included time spent working on the construction of the Huntly Power Station, in the New Zealand Army and at a meatworks. So by the time he ascended, he had certainly experienced much of life. Kiingi Tuheitia and his wife Mako Ariki shared a passion for kapahaka as founding members of Huntly's Tani Whānau Culture Club. His passion was never more obvious than when he was supporting Te Matatini. Throughout his 18-year reign, the Kiingi earned a number of additional titles. He was referred to as the King of Hearts during the celebrations of his 13th anniversary. As he spoke to iwi leaders, he told them, "You can't just use your head, you've got to use your heart. You're there for the people." More recently, he became known as the King of Unity. As he urged those attending a hui in January, he said, "We need a way forward that brings kotahitanga to all of Aotearoa." His focus was on seeking solutions which would make a difference for people. He also said, jobs, housing, kai, education, these issues are bigger than politics. It won't be easy, we haven't fixed it yet, but there's more mahi to do. The mantle now passes to his daughter, Te Ariki Nui Queenie nā wai hono i te pō. Noho I roto I te mamai me te aroha. Homai o roimata me o pauri. Ma te au Māori he pupuri. Sit with the love and the pain and cry out when you are in need. The people of the world hold the pain of your loss with you. Te ariki nui Queenie as you move into your new role. Me kōrero mātou o te kotahitanga, we shall speak of oneness. We shall remember the legacy your father left behind, and we treasure the time that you have gifted the world to grieve alongside your whānau. Nā mihi manaaki ki a koe I te kuine Māori.
I call on the Honourable Casey Costello.
Mr Speaker, Kiingi Tuheitia po tātou te wharewharu. Rest in peace. Rest now, you have done your duty. We honour you not for seeking this role, but for accepting this role and doing your duty, taking up the responsibility and leading the Kingitanga movement with such dignity. This was evident over the last 18 years, but to me, so evident at the Kuruneihana just recently, where despite your ailing health, you sat and allowed us to be part of that celebration, when I know you would have much preferred to be somewhere else. You shared your life and you did your role with such dignity. Mai tupuna is Patuani and Tamata Wakanini, a contemporary of Potatau. They were key figures in the decades after the treaty. The status of Kingi Tuheitia is underpinned by an ancestral duty. This has persisted from the 1850s, a service and duty that is a rarity in modern New Zealand. Duty to his iwi, duty to his whakapapa, duty to a broad range of New Zealanders. This comes through service, it comes through conduct, and it comes through influence. I recall Deputy Commissioner Wally Hamahau, who was at the tangi and talked of his frequent meetings with Kingi Tuheitia and his willingness to share in solutions and to look forward to the future. It is this duty and service that we all stand in awe of now. I would like to just take a moment to acknowledge the Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters, who could not be here and wanted to pass on his very best wishes, not just to Kingi Tuheitia, but to Queen Ngāwai Honi Utapo. You take up your call to duty now, your call to service, but know your tupuna will be with you as you journey through this life. They will be with you when you need to rest, because they will carry you. They will be with you when you need wisdom, because they will advise. And please know that as you see in this house today, that we will be with you also. We honour your call to service. We thank you for sharing King Tehutia with us in your moments when you probably wanted time alone. We will offer you our strength and support, and we look forward to the continuation of the Kingitanga for New Zealand.
Ora, nā rea me mau, kapa Kingi.
E te maanga i tēnā koe, e te whare tēnā tātou katoa. E te Kiingi Tuheitia pōtatau te herehere o te tuahitsu, haere atu rā, haere atu rā, haere atu rā. Prime Minister, if I can just acknowledge and thank you for your kind words on the paipai, actually. A number spoke to me about that and said how genuine and real it felt. So I wanted to mention that to you in this house, and to that end to mark this day for the King. So tēnā roho ki koe, tēnā tātou katoa. I want to just share some reflections, Mr. Speaker, to the whole party leadership across the House that attended, came to Turanga Waiwai, hustled through the thousands, deciding whether they'd mow, whether they had leaves on or didn't, or all of that it took to get into the House. I just want to acknowledge that. It is a big deal when one comes to such a kaupapa as a tangi and the tangi of our King. So to acknowledge that today. And Mr. Speaker, to you and your words of love and kindness to the King and to the whānau, pani tēnā roho ki koe. What I can share about Kingi Tuheitia and the institution of the Kingitanga, I share from more of a personal level as well, even though my whanaunga Shane shared about the whakapapa and the obligations that come with that. Mine is as much about the personal in it. Firstly, to mention that Te Kohau Health is a provider in Kirikiriroa, of which Te Makau Wariki was the patron. And for every event in which we required her to come to acknowledge what we were doing, to come and open up different facilities, the King always came with her. He came, he sat with her, he provided his own, he was a humorous fella, very quiet, and in fact, what I recognise about when he took the seat, when his mama passed away, and others have talked about that, his reluctance to do that, he was an ordinary man called to do an extraordinary thing, which is to be king. And others have made reference to that. But I think he got into it, can I just say? And he started to like it, and like it so much that even with the angst that Honourable Willie Jackson shows, he got his party right. So I just want to make that statement in the House, because he did a good thing. He was a good king, and we love him, and we will miss him. I married into this movement, the Kiingi, by the way, so the thousands and thousands, and it is true, the thousands of people that are in the background washing tea towels, making desserts, washing sheets, making up beds, all of the work that on a daily basis. And by the way, this was following the Koronehana, which was just not long before that, which was an extension. The Koronehana would usually run 4 days, maybe 5. It went for 7 days, but for the whānau at the pā, that's like 10 days. And then just a little break, and now with the death of the king, this 10 days. So, but it is an institution. It's an institution. It's not by accident that it gets this kind of capacity. It's grown the capacity. It has developed it. It has failed forward all the time. It is a mighty institution, and I married into it, in fact, on that very spot. So I've learnt and I've seen things inside that institution which are admirable, and we should acknowledge that, and I believe we are doing that today, Mr. Speaker. When the King, Mr. Jackson, said he liked the Pāti Māori, it also meant, though, that he could tell us off, that he could give us direction, even though we weren't necessarily keen on that. But what he was telling us was that I'm there for everything. We're there for everything, Debbie, Rawiri, everybody. We're prepared to tell you, even if you might be a bit taringa pisai, which means you can't quite hear. We are here for you, and we believe in you, and we love you. So this was the way in which he spoke with us, and Debbie referred to that earlier in her comments. So he was that kind of king, and we will miss him. Not the telling off so much, but what he also did was leave us a great queen. Right? Te ariki queenie ngā waihono I te pō. She's young, she's gifted, and she's Māori. And so that's a great thing, and we are excited, and we are there to look after her and protect her and watch her as she leads the way. She's bilingual, she's smart, she's very smart, she's she's credentialed in many things, but she's a girl from the pā. She's a Kiingi girl. She's young and she's gifted, and we fully support her. And I'd ask that we all do the same. And I have missed my time, Mr. Speaker, but tātou mā tēnei te mihi ki a tātou, kia ora rā.
The Honourable Louise Hudson.
E te kingi, Tuheitia, o tātou te whiriwhiri, te tuewhitu. Moi mai rā. Mākou are ki atawhai, kanui tāko, aroha mai. E te kuinina, wai. Ara mai rā, kia kaha, e te kuini hou. Kotahitanga, unity, a word that's been spoken and repeated across the House this afternoon. Kingitanga was to unify the many Māori tribes of Aotearoa. But we've heard and we've seen through his actions, the Kingi's aspiration was not only to unite the many tribes of Aotearoa, but to unify and unite all New Zealanders.
As a local MP based in the mighty Waikato, I've had many occasions to attend the Koronehana and other events at Tūranga Waiwai. So whether you are attending as a visitor on the first occasion or returning on many occasions, it's a day that's filled with much uncertainty, at times a bit of chaos, as we gather at the gate. One thing that's also a bit uncertain is the weather. One thing that is very certain is when that wind blows and the cloud is there, the chill will chill to the bone. But what is also certain is the incredibly warm welcome that every visitor will receive at Tūranga Waiwai. And that was no different this year. So no matter what your role, no matter whether you're with a party large or small, no matter whether you're in government or opposition, it is always a very, very warm welcome. But it's actually the quiet chats afterwards that I valued. And the Kiingi was an incredibly humble man, but also had very sage advice. And while he may have been a man of few words, his words did matter. And that's been clear about the recollections that have been shared by party leaders and my parliamentary colleagues today. One of my first memories of the Kiingi was in 2010, when the World Rowing Champs were at Karapiro. And we were sitting down for lunch with one of many of the overseas dignitaries, and he was patiently explaining some of the cultural elements that the visitors had seen. And what was always obvious in my interactions with the Kiingi was it was very much about teaching and showing and embracing and allowing visitors, whether a first-time visitor or one who was a repeat visitor, to learn a little more, to be able to embrace the culture, to feel the fear and speak the te reo anyway, to not understand necessarily the traditions and everything that was expected, but to just know that you were embraced in a cloak of welcome, and that there was no such thing as a mistake if you had an open heart and an open mind. I also, one of the highlights that I recall of Kiingi Tuheitia was actually the very first memorandum of understanding that Corrections signed, and that was with the Kingitanga. And when the Kiingi was talking about it, it was just so clear to him, and clear in the words he spoke, that he wanted not just young Māori, but all Māori to have great opportunities. And whether it was a young person that had come out of prison, to be able to give them every single opportunity of a different future. And I was humbled by his commitment in particular to mothers and the need for them to have houses to create a new future for their children. He was a Kiingi who was sacrificed, who lived a life of service that we will always be incredibly grateful for. Mā te ato te te kura, ara mai te te kura, tēnā koutou katoa.
Call on the Right Honourable Aotearoa New Zealand.
Karoria hareruia kia koe iho ngā mano tua uri wai o yo ki tonu tarangi me te whenua te nui o tō karoria. Nō reira tihei mauri ora. E tika ana kia tuku mihi poroporaki ki Kiingi Tuheitia po te tau te whero te tuawhitu. Nō reira whakapiri taku mihi poroparaki ki ngā mihi kua mihia e ngā memo o te whare nei I tēnei wā. Nō reira, haere te kingi, haere ki tua te ārai ki te kāinga tūturu o tātou mo te tangata. O te atu te wā ki a koe e oki e moi, e moi. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remember Kiingi Tuheitia from the perspective of, I come from Ratana Pā, and we had the pleasure and honour of hosting Kiingi Tuheitia and Te Mako Ariki and Te Kāhui Ariki on many different occasions. And it'd be true to say that he was well respected and loved by the Mōrehu and by Ratana. He was loved because, not only because he upheld the history and the traditions of the kingitanga, that relationship that started in the time of Kiingi Tarata, when Tupu Tainga Kaua came to Ratana Pā and spoke to Tahu Pōtiki Wiremu Ratana about the rights of Māori and the Treaty of Waitangi. And so we loved him because he upheld that. We loved him because he supported his mother, Tautairangi Kāhu, who consolidated the relationship with Ratana through our then leader, Te Reo Hura. We loved him because he knew about the history and that relationship between us and the basis on which that relationship began and was about. And we've heard many different relationship stories in this house today. And I'd ask members to reflect just how much energy it takes to have that many relationships with that many people and keep up with it and have a smile on your face while you're doing it. He had a smile that could light up a room. But most of all, he was loved in Ratana because of the way he gave the time to the people we call ringa ringa waiwai, other marae call ringa wera, the workers. He had time for them and he let them know how grateful he was that he was being looked after. And I think it's, it's a lesson for all of us that you can rise to the highest of offices, and there is no higher in Te Reo Māori than kingitanga. And not forget the people that help along the way, and he certainly did that. And I recognise, the difficulty that that road must have been, dealing with huge different issues. I mean, the egos alone of rangatira across the country can be problematic and difficult. And he seemed to handle it. And we heard from other members about getting tellings off. Well, yeah, I'm aware of other stories as well where he's let people know that he wasn't too happy with what was going on. I'll just leave it like that. So, but he had that ability, and I think it's great that this House can recognise that. I want to also add my aroha to Te Mako Ariki, Tamariki and Mokopuna, and the wider Kāhui Ariki as well. I think it is difficult. I can't imagine what it might be like sitting through all of those porphyry, the whole lot. Just imagine that. We could get up and walk away and go and talk to our mates, but they can't. They had to sit through all of that kōrero, the whole lot. They heard it all. And that is, I hope that was healing for them to know how much he was loved. And I think they were expressed in many, many different ways. I want to acknowledge Te Ariki Nui Kuini Ngāwai Hono I Te Pō. want to acknowledge that she got her name from the Wanganui River. She was born while her grandmother was on the Te Rahoi waka, and her grandmother asked the people of Wanganui to give her a name, and they gave the name Ngā Waihono i Te Pō. So I suppose us from Wanganui will be claiming her. We can think about it, but I think she will belong to the motu, and quite rightly so, and we'll be there. I'm sure my Ngāti Rangi and Wanganui whānau will be there to support her, everything moving forward. It's, I can't imagine also what that must be like for a young wahine. But I've got no doubt that she'll be able to uphold the traditions like her father did, her grandfather, right back to her great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, which is an amazing thing. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity for speaking. Ko te tūmanako ki a uhia mai e te runga rawa o nā manaakitanga ki runga ki tō mātou kuini hau pai marire.
Olon, Tiana Tuiano.
Tēnā koe te pika. Tākiri tū ko te kotahitanga, tākiri tū ko te mana motuhake. Tai mahi i rukiruki te tinana i te aroha, e kore rawa, e tutuki, e hoi kei te tūpau tonu nā whakaaro, kei te mōtete tonu nā whakaaro, mo te Kiingi, Tuheitia, potatau te whero i tonu mia ki roto i a taupiri kuao i tēnei wā. E te ariki nui, moi mai rā. Te ariki nui ki Tuheitia, nō hau te pō, e moi, e oki, e ara, te ariki nui ngā wai, hono i te pō, nō hau te ao, tēnā koe o tira i te whare o te kahui ariki, tēnā koutou katoa. Tuake tēnā ki te tautoko nā mihi kua mihia, hoi ki te hoki aku nā whakaaro ki tēnā o nā tangihana me te whakaaro aki, I ki te mātou tēnei me te tohu o te rangatira, tēnei me te tohu o te rangatiratanga. Ia rātou te tini, te mano I tai ki a tūranga waiwai, I kōrero tahi ai koe tahi o nā aku nei hoi I tatu ki runga I te mato te marae me te meatu, koai ka taia te manaki pēnei ana te āhua. Koai taia te tiaki, te tini, te mano. Kore rawa. Nō reira, e mi ana kia koutou Waikato tani wharai. Ki te whakāti mai tēnei me te rangatiratanga, tēnei me te manaakitanga. Te taia te whāngahia, tērā rahi. He tohu tērā o te rangatira. He tohu tērā o tō tātou ariki nui. Nā koutou anō I horatu tērā o nā whakaro kia tātou. Nō reira, nā niho wera, nā ringo wera, tēnā koutou katoa. Kei te whakaro ake, tāpiri atu aku nei whakaaro kia mākau ariki, ki te whānau kua panihia, tautoko katoa nā kōrero ki tō Adrian, I mea atu nā te roa o nā pōheri I noho rātou mo te wā roa. Enari, ko te tūmanako nui I rongo rātou tēnei me te aroha, I rongo mātou tēnei me te nākau mahaki, I rongo rātou nā ahuatanga o te whakaaro nui, me te mana nui o wiwi o wāwai tai ana ki runga I te marae. Tikana te kōrero, kui anō te kingi o te kotahitanga. I roa te wā I tohe ana tērā o nā kupu ki roto I nā marae, puta noa te motu. Enari, nāna anō I ki atu, me hara mai ki a tūranga waiwai I te tematanga o tēnei tau. Ki wānga nui tonu o te hararei raumati I tai mai mātou katoa. Tāna I mea atu, ko tēnei me te mana motuhake he waka hoi, ai? Nare, he waka eke no, tēnei waka o te mana motuhake. He kōrero tēnā, he rapu nā whakaaro tērā mo tātou katoa ki roto I tēnei whare. Haha tēnei me te kotahitanga. Me te whakaaro ake, haha te wahanga o tātou ki roto te paremata mo tēnei me te kotahitanga, ko tēnei me te mana motuhake. Tēnei me I whakatauke hia o tātou nei Kiingi, I ohaki tia tō tātou nei Kiingi ki roti o nā kupu o te tau tonu nei. Tāku nei, e toru nā wahanga kia tātou, e nohana ki tēnei o nā whare, te tuatahi ko te aro, kia mārama, kia kite, ana anō te kotahitanga, ana anō te mana motuhake. Ka puta anō ko te aronga, ko tēnei me te marama. Kia marama te tangata tērā, te mana moti haka tērā, te kotahitanga I mea ati tō tā tēnei Kiingi. Hoi, kei tāpiri ati ki tērā ko te menui mo tātou katoa. Tātou e whai whakaro ana ki tēnei me te kotahitanga, te rangatiratanga, tōna whanaunga, te mana moti hake te tautoko. Pehe tātou katoa, taia te tautoko. I te mea, I ki te tātou te kotahitanga ki roto I nā rā, ki runga I tūranga, I tūranga waiwai. Nō reira, tērā tu wero nui I ki mua te aroaro ki takene whakaro ki a tātou katoa. Hoi, e mehi ana ki a tātou katoa I tai ātina na mai. O tira kia koe e te pika, e mehi ana kia koe moi o kupu aki ki te whānau, o tira ki te ao Māori katoa. Taino kia kura, ia I te wā I tuana kura, nā te maha hoki o nā rōpu I pika hia a kura I tēnei wā. Hoi, ko te oranga no tira, I kite te marae, I kite te ao Māori, anei anō te paremate I haere nā tahi ana ki rungi te marae. Aha ko nā tohe, ki rotu I tēnei o nā whare, aha ko tō tātenei kaha ki te matapaki, nā kōrero, nā taupatupatu ki rotu I tēnei o nā whare, taino ki te rā o nā tangihana I haere nā tahi tātou. Nō reira, marungi I tērā ko tēnei me te kotahitanga, marungi I tēnei me te mana motihake, me kaha tātou te whai, me kaha tātou te tautoko, me kaha tātou te hāpahia, nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa.
Laura Trust.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ohara mai mo toko reo, ka tiwaha mai taku tamariki, motu mātou, korero o te reo Māori. Mena ka whakamatoe mātou te reo Māori. I'm sorry for any mispronunciations. My kids are listening and they'll be ready to call me out. But in the spirit of all the speakers before me, knowing that King Tuheitia wanted everyone to give it a bit of a go, I'm gonna give it a go. Katoa matoa e kone e tenera ke te mehe ke te kingatanga ke kingatanga me nā taonga e tuku maia o ka te haraha me e te kohetangatanga e tau turketaha ehe. That was terrible. While I cannot match the words of the orators that have spoken before me, I will move to my first language to maybe give myself a bit of a chance. We stand here today to acknowledge the Māori King and the legacy of the oneness that he upheld. As many have mentioned before me, King Tuheitia was often seen with his grandchildren, holding someone's baby or ensuring his mokopuna was held safely within the waka. He was a man who knew that the wellness of the village was dependent on the wellness of the tamariki. His love and kindness towards people will be something that we all remember. He was described as just a bit of a normal guy, used to be a truckie, loved his rugby league, and he loved his cars. His smile was contagious, and his presence warmed the hearts of many. He stressed the importance of togetherness and open conversation. He was a stoic and kind leader. To his daughter, Te Arakinui Queenie Ngāwai Honotepo, you are the second wahine Māori queen to take the throne. We look forward to your mahi as Queenie. We hope your journey through your mahi will be peaceful and smooth. Moi moi rā, te Kiingi Tuheitia.
I call on the Māori Party, I think. Hannah Rafiti Maupi Clark.
Tau piri te maunga, wai kapo te awa, he piko, he tani whae. Tō ia tai nui tapatuki te moana māwai e tō māku e tō. Ua te pau o tōku whare kia tūtanga he kapua whakairi nā ku nā runga mai o taupiri taku kiri kato kia e te anu mātau. He te iwi, whitiki, ngā tai nguru nei, whakarewa, whakarongo mai rā. E toru ngā kākahu o te kingitanga, tuatahi ko te whakaiti, tuarua ko te whakaiti, tuatoru ko te whakaiti. Hiko te uira, papa te whatitiri, Tuheitia te tipua, Tuheitia te taniwha, Tuheitia taku Kiingi, Kiingi o te kotahitanga, te superglue o te motu. Hoki wairua mai rā koe ki ngā Kiingi o te pō. I rise on behalf of Te Pāti Māori today, privileged to be able to give a tribute to the passing of our King. I want to acknowledge the government and the Prime Minister for allowing us to share our time. I want to thank the House for giving me the opportunity to speak. As being a young woman, there's no such thing as pai time. And being from Waikato, our first priority is to serve the multitudes. Thank you, King. Thank you for being wise, humble, a few growlings here and there, and for keeping us in line. But my most personal experience with you was that you believed in me so much. When we first announced that I was standing as a candidate during the election campaign, people either thought we were crazy, laughed, or they felt sorry for me. A hui was called with the king, and I asked him, if I ever get in, what do you want me to do for you in kingitanga? He softly replied and said, just be you, and gave a few people not to listen to, some of which were my own whanaunga. Ko ona o haki kia hau, inspire rangatahi that kotahitanga is the way forward. I was privileged enough to have him with us at our election night, and he said to me, I told you could do it. He never asked for anything, just checked in and asked if I was okay. Thank you, King. Thank you for serving 18 years. Thank you for reminding us that everyone, young and old, Pākehā and Māori, need to work together. He would even say, don't be cheeky to Charles, that's my friend. Mana tu mana, monarch to monarch. You called your iwi, called the motu, called te moana nui a kiwa, and the kotahitanga. But most importantly, thank you to Te Whare Kahuariki, his whānau, for sharing him with the world. Makau ariki, whatu moana, korotangi, te ariki nui koe ni ngā waihono i te pō, me ngōna mohopuna. We lost a king, but you lost a husband, father, and a papa. I also want to acknowledge his office. I've seen the magic firsthand at how you've helped shape alongside with King. Ngira, ruku moana, rāhui, moko tini, the list goes on. Your tangihanga was truly fit for a king. My MP hat came off and the black and white waitressing kākahu came on. I even waitressed a few MPs and ministers in Kimiora too. I've come to the conclusion that we work together better in Kimiora than in Parliament. Front and back was sorted to a T, King. Pai, opitaua, T-boys, ushers, kitchen, dungeon, doodoo gang, 4am hanawiti crew, broadcasters, kotahitanga in its purest form. E noho whakaiti ana au ki tōku iwi o Waikato. Kiingi pōtatau, kiingi o te tika, kiingi tāwhiao, kiingi o te maungarongo, kiingi mahuta, kiingi o te rangi Māori, kiingi te rata, ko te taupoki whakamāori o te tāpena karo o te whakaoranga o tāte atua i pai ai. Kiingi koroki, ko te mana motu hake o ngā waka katoa. Te ariki nui te ātairangi kāhu nā te ao katoa. Kiingi Tuheitia, kiingi o te kotahitanga. Ka rā ke mai ko taku ariki nui, koe ni ngā waihono i te pō tatau te wherowhero te tuawaru. Ka ora tō iwi, Māori i roto i a koe. Ka ora te kingitanga i roto i a tātou. Taku kuini reo Māori, ko hanga reo, kura kaupapa, kapahaka, kaitiaki, mātauranga Māori. Nei rā katuohu. I still don't have the words to describe the feeling as our Queen walked through the waharua. Nothing but an awe. However, I can still see the faces. I watched young girls' eyes light up, ruruhi crying and hugging one another. I heard a young girl whisper, it's like watching a real-life Disney movie princess, but better. I can only imagine the grief you're feeling, but I'm ready to serve you for the rest of my life. Your kura, iwi, clubs and motu are right there, young and old. In only a few days, we have watched how truly special you are. Your grace, humility, intelligence. We've seen this before your reign, and we are truly privileged to watch you as our Queen. E oati ana taku katoa kia koe, e oati ana te Pāti Māori kia koe e te ariki nui. Now, there's a lot of things that I don't agree on with Winston Peters. However, I wholeheartedly believed in his kōrero that he said, kingitanga is above politics. Politics lasts a day, kingitanga lives forever. This is all our kura. This is all that our kura, clubs, iwi, hapu, marae and grandparents know, is to serve kingitanga. Thank you to every party leader, member for sharing your kōrero today. Ka whakakawhi au me tētihi o ngā kiwai o te kete a rā ko te whai marire. Tō tiakina maramatanga e te atua ki tō mātou ki ngā tinana e māwiwi te ana tainua kia mātou katoa i te rānei ai. Nā
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. The contrary, carried. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.